Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Echelon Cycling Podcast. This is our 12th episode and an exciting week to say the least. Our long form, Ewan just dying slowly. Yeah, basically our long form discussion of what's happened in the week. And I mean, as always, I'm joined by Audu, creator, and Dan Lloyd, scrutinizer, Patrick, and Mr. Critter himself, Ewan Wilson as well. And yeah, I mean, where are you guys right now? Because, well, I'm just sitting in Oxford, so nothing exciting here.
I'm currently in Yorkshire on my back home on my Easter holiday from uni, but I'll be heading back down to Bath.
I'm currently in a popular chain hotel that rhymes with Shmemia Shmin in Belfast. After following Andrew Tate the other week to Romania, I've been following Joe Biden to Ireland this week, following him around the country, helping him rediscover his roots. That's why I'm here, and that's why I wasn't on the stream, because I was in rural Ireland over the past couple of days.
Imagine. I
Imagine
could imagine that, yeah. But I mean, we might as well start with Amstel Gold because it was the biggest race, even though it happened today of recording. We're recording on the Sunday. And yeah, what do you guys think of the race?
I didn't think they were the most entertaining races, to be honest with you. The men's or the women's. I know we largely cover men's stuff, but the women's SD Works won, which may or may not come as a surprise to people, considering that they do tend to just dominate a lot of races. Demi Vollering won, which is perhaps even less surprising. But it kind of went into the base of the climb with like 30 something riders. And then it was like just a bit of a puncher kind of shootout. It was kind of like fairly traditional in that sense. And then the men's race was perhaps a little bit more interesting, considering that some group went up the road before coverage even started, with Pogačar in there and a couple of other kind of big names. It was a decent race, but at the end of the day, it was a day which was won, or it was a very predictable day. Let's put it that way. What people expected to happen in terms of the people who were winning ended up winning, which I suppose is somebody who I quite like the underdog winning. Perhaps wasn't the most entertaining to me, just because I was hoping for somebody to perhaps upset the apple cart a little bit. But maybe some people just like the kind of predictable nature. I don't know.
I mean, I didn't watch the races live, but the women's race, I mean, the top two finished in the top two. I quite like Van Anrooy. She's 21 years old and she's an Aquarius. Quite cool seeing her get third place because she's so young. But in the men's race, yeah, I mean, a snooze fest. I don't think it's going to be one for the ages, but I'm happy Pogačar won. I think it's something to add to his list, and it feels like the right person won on the day. There's no real controversy, and I don't think we'll no offense to Michal Kwiatkowski, but we forgot about last year very quickly. Even the year before when Wout won, even though Wout was probably the best in the day, it's just like we kind of forgot about it. And I think this year will probably be the same, but there's no debate about who the best rider was on the day. But yeah, not an Amstel for the ages. I think we're still on a big emotional hangover from 2019's edition when Mathieu van der Poel came back. I see that video was making the rounds on Twitter the night before, but there's not going to be that moment this year. It's underwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, we were puzzled by Jumbo-Visma and the other teams, Bahrain Victorious as well, that they let Tadej Pogačar in that move before broadcast even started. So, I mean, in no world would you let such a red hot race favorite go up the road in such a big group. It just seemed crazy.
Yeah, it's a bit like at the World Championships when you had Remco Evenepoel go off in a group early on in the day, and you think, what's everyone done here? But I don't think I've watched a World Tour level race where there's been such an out and out favorite as Tadej Pogačar for this one. So I was surprised that it really did just go off. But even with his bike problem, he still made it back. And I mean, I think it just shows his strength. Other teams just playing silly tactics on the day, but they're not going to lose sleep over losing Amstel Gold. They've got Flèche and Liège-Bastogne-Liège next week to sort of try and fight back.
It did seem a little bit weird because when we were doing the commentary, Scott, we were just kind of like confused. We were like, Pogačar's up there, and nobody seems to be responding with a massive sense of urgency to try and bring back the overwhelming favourite for the race, despite the fact that he's got like a 30-second head start on you. And it's not even like he's out there solo. He's in there with a group of 15 or so he's still getting that respite. It's not like he's just bashing his head against the wind, just burning up matches. It did seem a bit odd, and we couldn't quite put our finger on it, but at the end of the day, like, I'm not a DS. So I don't know whether there was some kind of 200 IQ play going on that perhaps just didn't work out. But it did seem a bit odd from a viewer standpoint that nothing was really done to really challenge Pogačar too much. Not even by the people in the breakaway themselves. Challenging Pogačar is easier said than done, obviously, but nothing was really done to try to force him to do more work or anything, considering that he is the overwhelming favourite. And that seemed really odd that they were just like, we're going to ride with you and take you further towards the finish line, despite the fact that you are probably going to brushes anyway, and that just kind of didn't quite compute in my head.
Yeah, why would they sort of dance with the devil, if you will, in terms of letting Pogacar sort of ride with you, and they are riding with him very comfortably. It is odd, but I don't suspect we're going to see this an awful lot throughout the season. I think it's also because today I think it's also because there wasn't really a super strong other team to sort of help out. There were decent formations, but no team had full force at Amstel, which probably played into it as well.
Yeah, no Wout van Aert, no Remco Evenepoel, no Julian Philippe.
In this era where like victory and success is monopolized by so few teams and so few riders, once you take out some of those characters, then who really takes up the work? Is Agile La Mondiale really the guys who you'd expect to take it up? Because for the likes of Jumbo-Visma and Ineos aren't doing the work. I mean, it's interesting. It probably just shows the sort of power balance that we have at the moment, and maybe this is just a byproduct. The tactics today were a byproduct of the monopolized power we now have between a certain handful of teams in the sport.
So, I mean, now getting on to the controversial moment that Patrick and I were absolutely flabbergasted at when we saw it live, that was when the race commissaire was drafting essentially a Tadej Pogacar in the crucial moment where Ben Healy was making inroads on this deficit. Okay, well, you can argue that Ben Healy would probably not outsprint Tadej Pogacar, but we're used to seeing it from a team car drafting their riders. But here, the race organizer gets involved in the racing. Like, what on earth?
We just thought it was really odd. It was just one point they drove up alongside Pogacar, exchanged a few words with him, and then they didn't really accelerate away. They just kind of like hung there in front of him, to a point where you've ever ridden a bike and a car kind of overtakes you and it's just like slightly in front of you. You do notice a difference. And it was, although perhaps not a race like defining moment per se, in terms of was Pogacar probably going to win anyway? Yes. But it just sets a precedent where this needs to be sort of controlled and monitored a bit more and perhaps scrutinized a bit more by the UCI, because it sets a precedent which shouldn't be allowed. Like, you shouldn't have cars that close to the riders, not just from a standpoint of the benefiting of riders aerodynamically, but also from a safety standpoint as well. I feel like it was just a lapse of concentration today, and it needs to be assessed and ideally snuffed out a bit more in future races, because although it didn't affect Amstel today, that doesn't mean it won't affect future races through the rest of the calendar.
This wasn't the best advertisement, but Pogacar can help it. I don't think we should sort of villainize Tadej Pogacar for being in that position. He happened to sort of benefit from clumsiness, clownery up ahead in the organization, whether it was the commissaire's car driving, whether it was something in front, maybe even the race management made a bit of a blunder. We've seen that before in Amstel Gold, where cars have been out on course when they shouldn't have been. It's maybe more of a race management question than one that for the UCI to sort of investigate with riders and their impact.
Yeah, for sure. Tadej Pogacar had no influence on that. And what is he going to do? Like, I'm trying to win the race here. You're in the way, kind of. Piss off.
Maybe this is something in the rules and the protocol that they should streamline, and something that the police or the commissaires, the drivers, the chauffeurs should be briefed on beforehand.
Yeah,
Voctus was angry on Twitter, rightly so, over
he
this.
Always is.
I mean, if you're invested, your rider's lying second, and he's catching up. And then this happens. Like, there was no excuse from the commissaires on this one. But it's not Tadej Pogacar's fault. So, but I mean, we should talk about Ben Healy, because Ben Healy, incredible ride, first Irishman on the podium since 1980. So 22 years old. No one really looked at him. It was all Nielsen Paulus talk before the race.
It was a great performance by Ben Healy. He's been a good run of form, and I can't help but notice. But there's like this year, there seems to be a real increase in performance from the riders who are in a contract year, because there are a lot of riders in a contract year this time around, and Ben Healy's one of them. And it definitely felt like last year, 2022, he didn't have results which were worthwhile of a re-signing. And it's really good to see when a rider who is in a contract year, who is so talented, actually gets the results where he will now get a contract at the end of this year, because it would be such a shame to see him not get re-signed or go to somewhere where his talents aren't used to its full extent, because that would be arguably the worst case scenario. So not only am I happy that he's probably going to be getting a contract at the end of this year from somebody, even if it's not EF, but also looking forward to seeing what he can do at the Giro d'Italia, because he's provisionally down to do that. And I think that it'll be his first Grand Tour, and if he can carry this, not get ill, not get injured or anything, then it's only a few weeks away. I'm looking forward to seeing what Ben Healy can do there in his Grand Tour debut.
Yeah, I'm really excited about Healy. He's the rider who's been sort of on the radar for a while and waiting for a big result. He's part of this sort of younger generation of Irish riders coming through. And he's finally sort of hit the jackpot the past month. And yeah, it's really good to see. I think no doubt he'll stay with his team. Based on vibes, he's very EF, if you know what I mean. I can imagine him in sort of a Bohemian cafe ordering a flat white, wearing Carhartt or Palace clothing. He goes home and wears his EF Palace Crocs to walk around his lovely apartment. He just seems very EF vibes to me. So he'll probably stay here. And it's a really solid run of form, and to step out of the shadow as well today, where he had a really good Brabantse Pijl earlier this week, and to sort of show that he wasn't just a one-hit wonder, I think is a really big step forward for him, because it would have been easy for him to sort of be overlooked by the other riders in the squad today, like Paulos or Miguel Ray. But yeah, it's really good work for him, and it's good to see an Irish rider get some success on the World Tour level. It's been a while, really, because Sam Bennett not really quite there. So Healy showing that there's more fire in the Irish cannon.
Well, just sticking on Tadej Pogačar, because it seems like every week he's adding another achievement to his list of achievements. This season it's probably going to be his greatest season if he actually manages to win Liège, Bastogne-Liège, and the Tour, for example. But nevertheless, by winning the Amstel Gold, we think he's the only rider in history to win Paris-Nice, the Ronde van Vlaanderen, and Amstel Gold in the same year, because the other riders who had done that, win Amstel Gold and Ronde van Vlaanderen, were Eddy Merckx and Jan Raats and Philippe Gilbert, and none of them won Paris-Nice in the same year. So, I mean, process of elimination, that makes sense. The question is here, he's doing Flèche Wallonne, Liège, Bastogne-Liège. No one's won all three races since Philippe Gilbert in 2011. David Rebellin, he did all that in 2004. But the question here, long-winded way to get there, is he the favourite for Liège, Bastogne-Liège once again, or can Remco Evenepoel threaten Tadej Pogačar?
I think that Remco's really the crux of this, by and large, because Remco came out of, from what I can remember, he just kind of came out and just did Liège last year and then won it. He didn't do any of the other Ardennes kind of more traditional warm-up. He just sort of came out of nowhere. And especially this year, there's been a bit more of an increase in riders just kind of getting shipped in out of nowhere and from their, volcano lair or whatever, and just kind of like doing well in a race. Remco, currently, everybody kind of knows he's kind of just like at altitude.
He did Flèche Wallonne and the Brabantse Pijl last year.
Oh, did he? Oh, well. Forget everything. Forget what I just said.
No, carry on.
But I don't know. He is the person who could upset Pogacar's ability to win that, especially since Remco, kind of similar to Pogacar, is quite prone to attacking from quite far out, which gives other teams little opportunity to anticipate moves and try and get up a road early, because the two big favourites pretty much do that as a de facto, as they're like a strategy. So it's going to be really hard for somebody else, I think, to upset the apple cart. I think it is likely between those two. But if it came down to a sprint between them, I would probably say that Pogacar would be the favourite, yeah.
Yeah, I have a feeling that if Remco goes early, Pogacar would follow. I don't think he can replicate move by move what he did last year in La Redoute, purely because people will be there by his side, knowing that this is where he went last year. There'll be more attention there. And remember, last year was Mauri van Savenon sort of digging in beforehand, setting things up for Remco. Mauri van Savenon is not on the same level of form this year, and I don't think they can copy-paste that tactic, which worked so well last year. They'll have to figure out something else to do. And I don't think Remco can leave it to Rochefort-Faucon. So it'll be something later in the profile. I think Pogacar could follow Remco, and if it comes down to Rochefort-Faucon, I think Pogacar's won it if it's between them. What Remco does have is that engine, which I think he's a little bit stronger at than Pogacar, even though Pogacar, I think, does also have a strong engine. I think Remco, he's a European former world champion. He has such a good time trial engine that he might have that oomph that Pogacar doesn't quite have. But we've never really seen them go tete-a-tete. We haven't seen them go mano-a-mano, if you will. The World Championships was kind of altered or derailed because of that big move where Remco went. Yes, that was Pogacar's mistake, as it was everybody else's mistake for letting him go up the road. But we haven't quite seen them look at each other and go at it at a stage race, really, let alone a classic, I don't think.
Tirreno last year, kind of, but not really.
Yeah, but they weren't really sort of tete-a-tete, mano-a-mano in terms of like really battling each other out. Remco was quite a bit behind. Sorry, Remco, but it's kind of the truth.
Shots fired.
He won a Grand Tour that last year. Tadej did not. I mean, it will be interesting to see. And I mean, this power dynamic between them and this battle might actually be quite an important one in the years to come. But for the time being, I think Pogacar is the better at Liège. I think there's more scenarios that could suit Pogacar than they could Remco. But I wouldn't be surprised if Remco were to win next Sunday.
Yeah, that's true. It wouldn't surprise me if Remco gets put into Flanders next year, considering how quick step we're doing this year. But like, just throw him at it. We'll just see how it goes. I reckon it wouldn't surprise me if Remco did well.
I'm surprised they didn't do it this year because he's world champion. Such a big deal in Flanders. I'm surprised they didn't throw him into the squad there. It's pretty low risk in terms of crashing. But I mean, I say that he could have been wiped out by the Matsiuk move. Or
true, very true.
Incidents.
I mean, in terms of the monument hunting, it's a shame that we're not going to get Mathieu van der Poel here. Liège, kind of hard to tick that off. Tadej Pogacar has already taken it, but like the fact that Wout van Aert finished on the podium last year means that Mathieu van der Poel can definitely finish on the podium.
I guess theoretically, yeah, because you would say, yeah, Wout, Mathieu are very similar in a lot of senses. So therefore, yeah, Mathieu would, in theory, be able to also finish on the podium of Liège. He finished in the top 10 a few years ago. Yeah, in theory, like Mathieu could do well here. Yeah, because we were saying on stream today how it is a bit odd that Mathieu and Wout decided not to come to Amstel, despite the fact that they seemed obviously in good form at Paris-Roubaix, and usually riders who do Roubaix tend to go on to do Amstel. So we were a little bit confused there. But yeah, I guess there's still time to change. I mean, Wout van Aert's addition to Liège-Bastogne-Liège last year was relatively late. So who knows? Maybe Alpecin realising that, well, today, who was their best performer? Was it Gianni Vermeersch? Or it might have been Søren Krauss, something like that. Maybe they realise, well, actually, our Ardennes team, because I don't think Quentin Hermans is feeling quite right or something. Maybe they're like, oh, let's just put Van der Poel in. Give it a go. Why not? What's the worst that could happen?
He wins.
Oh, yeah.
Wout was fielded because he missed out that week last year from COVID, and I think he was a little bit frustrated and wanted to get results elsewhere. At the beginning of this season, remember, I keep quoting it, he wanted to win a Big Fish Classic, and he hasn't done that. Maybe he'll give it his one last shout at Liège. There were rumours that he might do it, but I don't blame him and Mathieu for taking a weekend off, really. You had the Gent-Adrie weekend, then you had the Ronde van Vlaanderen, then you had Paris-Roubaix. Those guys have been at it every single weekend. Give them some time off, you know, just for one weekend they can relax and I don't know, go for a walk or something.
They wouldn't have let Tadej Pogacar go up the road like that.
Yeah, true. I think almost maybe teams are looking around thinking, is Mathieu where? Shouldn't Mathieu be following? Shouldn't Wout be here? And realizing that they weren't on the start list for the race. But yeah, I mean, next weekend will be interesting to see if any of the riders sort of get thrown into the start list that we weren't expecting. I think Liège is the race outside of Lombardie where that happens the most. And I would suspect Wout might have a chance of getting thrown in last minute. To provide some structure maybe to that Jumbo-Visma squad, which doesn't quite seem like it has a sort of out-and-out leader. And can Jumbo really risk it at another monument without a leader? I think, didn't they kind of want a good monument performance before they go into the Giro? Wout's going to have a lot of downtime before his next targets of the Dauphiné, I believe, then the Tour de France. So, I mean, what's 250 kilometers difference going to make, Wout?
Okay, put your necks out. Who do you think is going to win Liège-Bastogne-Liège? I'm going to say Camp.
You're going to say Alexander? You can't blooming heck.
No.
I haven't even seen the start. Ben Healy, he'll win. Easy.
Mathieu van der Poel. He's not even on the start line, but I have
That's a bold move. You and be the voice of reason amongst us.
Well, I was going to say, since everyone's giving crazy picks, I should pick a right outsider. You know what, actually? Tish Benoit winning this. I don't think that would be that alien if Tish Benoit were to win this, but I have a feeling it will be either Pogacar or Remco. I think just the way that cycling is going, the sort of deep monopolization of victories, high-level victories to a certain small pool of riders, it's got to be one of those guys. I would be really surprised if it's an outsider. And if it's an outsider, they will come from one of these big hitting teams, like an Ineos, like a Jumbo. It won't come from AG Desert, Citroën.
With that, moving on. And let's talk about the Brazilian national championships. No, I'm kidding. No offense, Brazil.
I have my notes ready for that one, but we can go elsewhere if you want to.
The Giro di Sicilia, a race that Astana actually managed to win a stage race with one of their star riders, Alexey Lutsenko. I would say he is their star rider. He was up there in Amstel as well, as we know.
I didn't watch it live. I just watched a couple of the highlights and stuff. And you know what? It was all right, to be honest. It was a cool little throwback. Bonifacio won a stage. That was a good little trip down memory lane. And then who was it? Joel Suter, who was riding for UAE last year. He won a stage with a bit of a attacked a bit early. That was kind of cool. Lutsenko winning. I was just like, it was a good fun time for a few days, actually. I quite liked the lack of the big favourites. I thought it was quite entertaining and a bit fresh and a bit new. It was like taking a mint after having a fish and chips or something like that. It was quite refreshing. It was nice.
It was like taking a shot of limoncello after your big Italian main course. Yeah, or a tiramisu, whatever you want to say. But I mean, I really like Sicily. I think it's a fascinating part of the world with the history there. I really like when the Giro visits. I think it's always interesting to see, and it's got quite an interesting relationship with cycling, especially in recent times.
Nibali.
Yeah, it is. It is a fascinating race, and I feel like, you know what, I'm quite content with the results. There's not one that I'm a little bit bummed out about. Finn Fisher-Black winning the opening stage, I think, was a really nice story for him. Big injury last year, didn't really quite have his opportunity to burst through the ranks that we were hoping for. But now with this win at the Giro di Sicilia, he's kind of back in there, finished top 5 in GC. He's 21. Also, I mean, yeah, that win by Joel Suter, I think, was a big mess up by the peloton and letting that go up the road. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely an interesting week of racing, and I'm happy that Lutsenko got a win. I think Lutsenko's kind of slept upon a little bit. I think he's a really, really good rider, super versatile. He can do so many different things and doesn't quite get as many wins as you would hope that he could. He still has a number of Grand Tour stage wins to his name. And I think this overall win at Sicilia, it's nice to see. Also, I feel like they win the prize for the nicest A, trophy, and B, leader's jersey. It's a really cool leader's jersey.
Better than the Infinity Trophy.
Yeah, because not going to lie, the Trofeo Santafina looks a bit cheap.
Oh,
sorry, Giro d'Italia. But no, it's like hollow. It's like fiberglass. If you like put it down on the table too hard, it would shatter. It might even be plastic. Who knows?
What's the Tolls trophy? Is it just a plate that you put a cake on? Is that what it is?
It's a bowl. It's a blue bowl.
Can't remember it.
Exactly. It's the most underwhelming trophy. Despite the fact that you put yourself through so much pain for 3 weeks, you barely get prize money, and then you get this blue bowl with like this tiny little stand at the bottom. It's like a glorified fruit bowl.
I've actually held Pantani's, and that was one of the scariest moments of my life, not dropping it. But it's because they don't care about it in Italy. It's the jersey. They don't care about this. Yeah, as you said, the glorified fruit bowl. But I mean, we also, moving on from trophies, we had races in France as well. And it seemed like one rider that you two bigged up, the young 21-year-old French guy, Kevin Vauquelin, he actually did quite well.
Oh, Kevin Vauquelin's just, what a man. It's just nice when France get a good young rider. It just feels like after a few years where people are a bit down, it's like, oh, we're not going to win the Tour or something. But then we get like these kind of nice young riders, because we've gone through kind of the Bardet and Pinot. Gaudu, of course, is kind of on a bit more of like a resurgence this year, of course. We've talked about him going for the podium at the Tour. Yeah, it's just cool to see Vauquelin doing well. Just another name of the mix. He's more like all-rounded. He's also a very good time trialist, as well as being quite good at climbing as well. He's quite a good one-day racer as well. He's just a nice, well-rounded French rider. And I just think that's really cool, because there isn't really a rider who I can really pin him down to, who he's very similar to. I'm sure there is one, but I just can't think of one off the top of my head. Somebody who's a good one-day racer, bit of a GC threat, bit of like a time trialist. I don't really know. I just quite like it.
Alexey Lutsenko.
Oh my word, he's the French Alexey Lutsenko. He literally, basically is. There you go. Full circle.
That's the epiphany of this episode. It's that Kevin Vauquelin is really the Norman version of Alexey Lutsenko. But it was an interesting couple of races in France during the week. Of course, Paris-Camembert, the cheese lovers race that was won by Valentin Ferrand, ahead of a good Breton kid, Ewan Custio. a shout out because he has a very similar name to my own, the Breton incarnation thereof. And he's just 20 years of age, and a second place in Paris-Camembert, good sign of things to come for him, especially for a Breton rider on Arkea Samsic. I think that shows good signs to come. Also, Victor Lafay finally getting another win after that Giro success. We've been waiting and waiting and waiting to see if Victor Lafay could possibly come back, or at least I've been waiting and waiting and waiting to see if Victor Lafay could possibly come back. And he did in Besançon, a bit of an uphill finish. He won ahead of Lenny Martinez, who's a really good kid, 19 years of age. He won the Valle d'Aosta race, which is a big youth race. I think, was it last year or the year before? He's on the Groupama team, so he's another one of their sort of wonder kids that could come through. And Vauclin, yeah, I'm super excited for Vauclin, but I'm a little bit worried that once we get to the Tour de France, he'll just like fade away, which we've seen before with a couple of these guys who do very well in Coupe de France, kind of second-tier French racing. And then once they go to like a Tour de France, we forget all about them.
I mean, he won the Tour du Jura Cycliste as well, which was like, that was a hard finish as well. Like he beat Pino, Guillaume Martin, Nons Peters.
Guillaume Martin's a bit of a blast from the past. It's not a great sign now.
The reason is, obviously, this is a one-day race. And this is not Guillaume Martin's forte, because he doesn't quite grasp the concept that there isn't subsequent days where he can go in a breakaway and make up time. So a one-day race is perhaps a little bit confusing. He doesn't quite realise that he can't then go in a breakaway and gain 8 minutes in 3 stages' time. He's got to the end, and actually his DS has said, oh no, that's it. That's the end of the day. He's like, what? How does this work? Maybe that was it. I don't know. Yeah, Guillaume Martin, the eternal, what was it? What do people say? Like the human yo-yo just goes up and down GC like that. It kind of frustrates me at times, but then at other times I just laugh at it. I just think this is just brilliant.
I want him to release a new book. That's what I want.
Yes.
So Catavello is great, but I want the sequel. I want him to relate other things to bike races. If he could do one about sort of artistic movements and relate them into a big Tour de France setting, that could be really cool. Guillaume, if you're watching, intellectual copyright page.
Of course he is. Of course he is.
So he's a big fan.
We're going to come into one of our new segments before Rider of the Week, and it's transfer news, as we love transfers, and there'll be a lot more across the channels, etc. But the big transfer that was kind of mentioned on Twitter, mentioned in one of the news broadcasters, was Mathieu van der Poel, rumoured, very thinly rumoured, to UAE Team Emirates. What did you guys think of this?
I'd rather it didn't happen. I mean, I know it's just a rumor, but it's just kind of annoying. I don't even know where the rumor came from. Wasn't it like the race director of Amstel Gold like said it? And I don't know. Is it just some person who, through Chinese whispers, has heard something which has been passed down 10 people, and it's actually just completely false or something? Firstly, it wouldn't make sense. Why would Mathieu van der Poel go to UAE other than a money perspective? Got a whole team around him. It's working well. He's getting the results. I don't think he would necessarily have an issue with that. And him and Pogačar with Cobble Classics, that's just not going to work either. So I hope that if it is true, it doesn't happen.
This is, I mean, a silly rumor. I don't think it's based in any sort of in any real truth. No, UAE were interested in Van der Poel. What does that mean, interested, instead of like wanting to sign? Who knows? Remember, I mean, last year we had the Remco to Ineos rumors because Patrick Lefevre mentioned in his column that Dave Brailsford sent him a text message jokingly asking him how much he would pay for Remco Evenepoel. We sort of ran with that story. This probably has come from a similar place of misinterpretation or, Chinese whispers, as you say. But there are other big, decent transfer rumors on the table, courtesy of Gazzetta. Scott, should we dive into those?
Go for it.
Okay, from our sources over at Gazzetta dello Sport, we have a couple of transfer rumors. First of all, with some prolongations, which includes Juan Seba Molano. He'll be staying at UAE. But the transfers from team to team will begin with Gino Meta, who is rumored to be leaving to Tudor Pro Cycling. He is on a contract year right now, and early on it seems like Tudor have the first option and the first bid on the table for him. Also, Matteo Jorgensen, who's currently riding for Movistar. Rumors are circulating around him moving to either Jumbo-Visma or EF, both of which I think make a lot of sense. And also an update on the Carlos Rodriguez story. We believe that Movistar are still the frontrunners to take Carlos Rodriguez, the reigning Spanish champion, at the end of this year.
Carlos Rodriguez, we've talked about Ineos Grenadiers so many times on the Echelon, how that they seem a bit, well, they were transitioning from older riders in the twilight of their careers to this younger generation. And here, Carlos Rodriguez, one of the key riders, could be moving to a rival. That seems crazy that they haven't tried to hold on to him.
It is weird, I suppose, because if they lost Rodriguez, that would really be like, I don't know, cutting themselves off at the legs, because he is really the proven youngster who they have. They have other youngsters who could certainly become good GC riders in the future, but they aren't as proven as Carlos Rodriguez, who, did the Vuelta last year and did very well, despite the fact that he crashed quite late on in the final week. It does kind of make sense that he would go to Movistar because he's Spanish and it's a Spanish team. Would he do that? How would it work with Mas, especially in there as well? Of course, Mas is going to be the main man for the Tour. Would that just mean that Rodriguez just gets pied off to the Giro until Mas retires or wherever, or then they do a co-leadership? And we know how Movistar co-leaderships go. I think from a cultural standpoint, it makes sense to but Ineos do have a history of having quite a Hispanic almost kind of contingency in their team. So culturally, I think it makes sense. But from a team structure standpoint, I don't think it does.
I agree. I think it's going to be strange on Movistar. I'm not 100% sure it'll work out. We've seen them sort of lose touch of some young riders' talents, if you know what I mean. Like they've signed riders you would think could go into great things, and they don't quite progress to the lofty heights we presume before. Carlos Verona, maybe. I forgot about Iban Sosa even existing in the peloton, no offense. But he was such a promised rider, moved over, faded into obscurity. I'm not sure if the same is going to happen to Carlos Rodriguez. He's shown more promise than Iban Sosa. But yeah, I mean, we spoke about this last year a little bit in the transfer talks later into the season. This offer has been on the table for a while. So I feel like the fact that it's been renewed and the talks are being sort of written about now in Gazzetta shows that there might be some truth in them. The skeptic in me believes that Rodriguez wants to go so he can be part of the next season of LDM Menos Pensado, so he can get a sort of front runner role. He can be like one of the leading names in the credits. He wants a Netflix career afterwards. This is all part of building his Netflix portfolio.
I mean, that makes complete sense. But this would be a huge loss once again. Like losing Carapaz, that's one thing, but a rider that could essentially go on to do bigger things. But I mean, the gig that you were highlighting, that maybe he's just sent off to the Giro for a number of seasons before Enric Mas is too old. That's not a bad gig, to be honest, because then he's the poster boy for the Giro. For Movistar, it's great because they have two contenders in some respect. Don't pull me down on the Enric Mas being a contender for the Tour. But I mean, you have two riders that could conceivably be top 5 in 2 Grand Tours, and that's a bucket load of points, and then they can go together in the Welter.
That's what Carapaz was in 2018 and 19. He was sent off to the Giro because he wasn't as good as Landa or Quintana or Valverde. Like, he was sent off to the Giro and he won one of them. So you never know. Maybe Rodriguez can get his chance to prove himself at the Giro. I don't know, but at the same time, is there a slot for him at Ineos in the years to come? Thomas is sort of walking out of the scene. I'm losing hope day by day in Egan Bernal coming back. And the younger guys are maybe just a little bit too young. Thymen Arensman, I don't think, is a sort of nail on for top 5 for the next 5 years. So I think maybe Rodriguez is at that stage in sort of his career progression where he probably could stay at Ineos and been given some good opportunities. But I feel like his sort of pathway is very similar both teams. We don't know whether there's money behind the scenes that's pulling sort of strings one way or the other. But yeah, I'm starting to believe that this one will happen purely because these talks have been renewed. But I think some of the other rumors on the table are also quite interesting here. Matteo Jorgensen, who had a brilliant Spring Classics campaign, finished top 10 at Paris-Nice. Do you guys think he's going to be a good addition to Jumbo or EF? Which pathway do you see being the more legitimate of the two?
I would like to see the EF avenue more, just from the standpoint that Jumbo, it just seems like superfluous at that point. Bringing in Matteo would just be another guy in there. They've already got so many mountain kind of GC riders. He would just sort of fade into the mass of bodies that they have. And I'd hate to see that happen from a rider who's kind of like done well and he's like making a name for himself. And then all of a sudden it's just like Jumbo. And it's just kind of like, I think that'll be a shame. I think that EF suits him more. from an American rider going to an American team like that. And especially since EF are very prone to, like, they don't really have, I never got Carapaz, but there's certainly more space in EF, I think, for Jorgensen to have his own chances and show his own colours in that sense, and kind of get his own good results. If he wants to be a GC rider or whatever, they got Grand Tours available for him to do that. He's good at one-day races. The combination of him, Paulus, and other American riders like Sean Quinn in there as well, I think that'll just be a really good dynamic. And it sounds bad, but I do hope that he doesn't go to Jumbo.
I mean, the money's going to be a big thing as well. Jumbo-Visma, are they just going to throw cash at him? But I mean, the whole American go-to American team, Jonathan Vogters as well. The PR would be amazing for the team. And yeah, if he goes to Jumbo, it's basically just like Kenny Elson going to Ineos Grenadiers or Sky. He goes in there and then you see him 3 years later, nothing on his palmares but a fat bank account, probably. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, he'd slot into their squad quite well. And that Swiss Army knife rider type that Jumbo really like. A bit like a Jan Tratnik, Rowan Dennis to some extent, Nathan van Hooydonk, Christophe Laporte. These guys who can do lots. I think Jorgensen would fit into that squad very well. But I wouldn't I don't think it's going to get quite as much success or freedom as he would at EF, but we'll wait and see. I don't know if there's an extension of Movistar also on the table as an option for him, or whether he's certain on leaving. But the other transfer that I mentioned, Gino Merda going to Tudor, it's a step down in terms of the professional level, down to Pro Continental instead the World Tour where he was at. But I really see this. I know Gino's a guy who he thinks a lot. He's quite a sort of deep thinker, and I know he's been wanting change in some capacity for the past couple of years. I was surprised he actually extended with Bahrain in the first place. I thought he really wanted change at the end of 2021, but stayed with Bahrain for those 2 years, and I'm not surprised to see that he wants to go to another team. But Tudor, I thought he was a World Tour rider, to be honest.
Depends on Tudor's plans. They could have World Tour ambitions.
But then that's not going to happen until the end of this cycle, which is in 2 years' time.
Yeah.
What Merda could do until then is to sort of wait it out and go to another team, slot in there for 2 years, and then join Tudor when he's a little bit older. But if he wants to be the sort of flagship rider for them, he's a Swiss guy going to a Swiss team. It would make sense. He's probably one of the best Swiss climbers of the moment. Probably the best.
I think you're right. It's kind of similar to what I said about Rodriguez, which is that culturally it makes sense because, like you said, it's like he would be the poster boy for Tudor Pro Cycling, and I don't know what their, like Scott said, what their plans are, but they've got Camp in there at the moment, get Mader, if they manage to get another good rider or two, then all of a sudden it's starting to formulate itself into something. But yeah, like you say, he is a World Tour quality rider. Of the Vuelta for, what was it, not last year but the year before, where did he finish in GC? Was it 5th or 6th or something like that?
He won. Yeah, he was right up there for fifth, I think. On the last day he moved up.
Yeah,
competitive day racing, and he won the white jersey, if I recall.
Yeah. So therefore, he definitely is he is a quality rider, but maybe he is, how you say, maybe he's hoping for something a bit more less stressful, a bit less committed, and perhaps a less busy calendar that you get with a kind of pro Conti level team. Maybe he's wanting that a bit more. But saying that, if he, like you say, I think it is perhaps a good idea that maybe he could go somewhere else for 2 years, let Tudor develop as a team. Because let's face it, they're a new team. They perhaps need to find their identity and find out what they're good at and what they're kind of specialising in terms of the riders that they're bringing in, what they want to actually be good at as a team. Because as a pro Conti team, you need to kind of focus on, like, we're going to be good at Ardennes, be good at cobbles, going to be good at sprint or whatever. So I think that he could certainly go to somewhere like Intermarché or wherever, or just some other team for a couple of years and then maybe go to Tudor. I think that he'll certainly be hot property, that's for sure.
If he's on a roster for Tudor, that would help them get more license, more wildcards maybe, because they have a genuine GC contender, because a lot of Tudor's riders are young, or they're just not quite there enough to sort of headline a start list, and especially in terms of their climbing. They've got a lot of good sprinters, Alexander Camp out of a Declane. Now Joel Sutter won a race the other day. Like, to have a good solid climber on that as well shows that the team's a little bit more well-rounded, that they could probably fight for a wild card more than like Corotec could, or one of these other teams that are just sort of missing that headline act to sort of bump them up in terms of the other ones. We've seen this happen so many times where Quintana went to Arkea when they weren't quite there in terms of getting wildcards to bigger races. Sagan to some extent for Total.
Total doesn't really have a pure identity, especially when Sagan goes. I think Total will be struggling a little bit in terms of their identity as well. I think you're right. There are quite a few of. I'd say that perhaps Aolo are kind of finding it. They had, they've had that stage win, and they kind of are forming themselves as like a definite climber team, like more kind of GC focused. And then they've got Albanese as a bit more of a well-rounded rider as well. I feel like they've got a good identity, but I think you're right. A pro Conti team it's important to have that sort of identity almost as to what they're good at, but having that identity isn't good enough to necessarily get your wildcard invite. It's showing that versatility across different types of disciplines that really entices the big organizers to invite you in.
Yeah, definitely having sort of top tier riders will help, especially for these. I think these French races will be a big roof if they can smash their way into those in the way that Uno X have done recently. If Tudor can rival Uno X, because I think Tudor maybe have a little bit better, more strength than Uno X, adding Merda here could really sort of rival Uno in terms of getting these wildcards to more of these sort of French races, which in turn will help them get points, and by the end of the next cycle they could be in a very good position maybe to be fighting for a World Tour license. But I mean, that team also needs to grow as well, maybe in terms of budget, maybe in terms of roster, and Merda could definitely be part of it. Even during this discussion, actually, I've sort of changed my mind. I think if Merda were to go now, it could actually be quite a nice project for him. I think he'd really relish in that, to be fair.
But I mean, anyway, coming to the last part of the show, Rider of the Week, and obviously Tadej Pogačar screams that, but that's too easy. So, I mean, Patrick, I'll let you go first. Who's your Rider of the Week?
My Rider of the Week is Francesco Bassato, who is the kind of Italian young puncher for Intermarché's development team, but he won the under-23 Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and he also finished in, 14th place at the Brabant-Sipel, which, as a rider who 20 years old, he kind of gets brought up into their kind of elite team, and I think that that's a really promising Italian puncher coming up that will certainly be worthwhile people keeping tabs on into the future, because Intermarché, very exciting team, very dynamic team, very they like to give people opportunities. I think that Bassato would be a brilliant addition to that team. I can't wait to see what he could do in the future.
My rider of the week is Ben Healy for EF Education First Easy Post. I like Ben Healy, but also because he's done very well this week. Second place at Brabant-Sipel and second place at Amstel Gold. So I think it really solidifies good form that he's been that he's got in his legs over the past couple of weeks, and it also shows what could come later in the season as well for EF, who have, I think, really improved and stepped up their game in 2023 so far, and hopefully they can keep that momentum going into the Giro.
Yeah, Ben Healy very strong. But I'm gonna pick one obscure one. I'm 100% in the reason for most of the Sweden jokes. Obviously, Norway and Denmark have phenomenal riders right now compared to their history. But I'm gonna go with Sweden because one of their youngsters, a 19-year-old for the national team, Jakob Sönnerqvist, he actually won a stage of a French race, the Tour de Loire. Ewan can pronounce it correctly, but I can't.
Loire is cher.
The Swedish riders doing well is something we don't really talk about enough. So that this 19-year-old managed to take a stage in a race that had a number of former World Tour riders or Pro Continental riders really shows that he could be up there in the next few years, potentially, if he gets caught by or taken by the right team. But anyways, that's it for our 12th episode. Make sure to check all the different platforms out. We're on Amazon, we're on all of them, basically, even Spotify. And of course, as always, comment down below what you thought of anything we've been talking about. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. And of course, as always, thank you for watching and have a nice day.